The Phoenix drifted in the vast silence of space, its hull glowing faintly as it orbited the ancient ruin on the outskirts of the galaxy. Captain Aria Jensen stood alone on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. The stars outside seemed so far, as if mocking the insignificance of the ship against the immeasurable expanse. Yet, she knew better. This was humanity's hope, her hope that the secrets buried within these ruins could change everything. "Captain, the scans are coming in," said Lieutenant Markov, a tall officer with sharp eyes and a steady voice. He looked at Aria from his console, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. "We're reading an anomalous energy signature. Definitely alien." Aria's gaze shifted toward the holographic display that flickered to life before her. The irregular patterns on the screen didn't resemble anything known to human science. Strange, jagged lines cut through the structure of the ancient city, something far older than any civilization they'd encountered. Her instincts buzzed with a mix of excitement and caution. "Anything that could be a threat?" Aria asked, her voice steady, though she felt a flicker of unease crawl up her spine. Markov hesitated, eyes scanning the readout. "Hard to say. The energy levels are off the charts. Whatever's down there, it's ancient and powerful." She nodded. "Prepare an extraction team. I want full scans of the area, but no contact yet. Let's not take any unnecessary risks." The Phoenix had been drifting for days, waiting for this moment. The mission to uncover these ruins was no mere exploration, it was the chance for humanity to turn the tide in the galaxy. Earth's resources were dwindling. Humanity's colonies on distant worlds were vulnerable. If they could harness the power of these ancient alien technologies, they might stand a chance against the growing threats from the Vrethian Alliance, the most advanced and ruthless of the galaxy's empires. A voice crackled over the comms, breaking Aria's focus. It was her first officer, Commander Drayton, his tone unusually tense. "Captain, we've got a message coming through, Priority 1. It's from the Vrethians." Aria's heart tightened. She didn't need to ask. She could already feel the weight of Zoratha's presence before the message even came in. "Play it," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. The screen flickered, and the face of High Commander Zorath appeared. His pale, reptilian features glowed with a cold, calculated menace, his eyes narrowing as he spoke in a low, rasping voice. "Captain Jensen, you and your people have made a grave mistake." Zoratha's words hung in the air, cold and foreboding. "Those ruins you've uncovered belong to a power far beyond your understanding. A power that will destroy you if you dare to wield it. Leave it be, or your precious humanity will burn before it ever reaches the stars." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a tense silence in its wake. Aria felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't let it show. The Vrethians had been a constant thorn in humanity's side for years, undermining every attempt to expand and establish influence in the galaxy. Zoratha's words were as much a threat as they were a warning. "He was not a man to take lightly." "That bastard," Drayton muttered under his breath, his face dark with anger. "He thinks we're weak." Aria's expression remained neutral. "We won't back down. Prepare the team. I want full gear, no taking chances. We're going in." She turned and walked toward the bridge's exit, her mind racing. The Vrethians wanted the ruins for themselves, and Zorath had made it clear they weren't going to let anyone else access the technology. But the power they were hiding, this ancient knowledge, could be the very thing humanity needed to survive. Aria wasn't about to let some alien warlord dictate humanity's future. Minutes later, Aria stood in the hangar bay, where the extraction team was gearing up. Her officers, including Drayton and Lieutenant Markov, were adjusting their suits and equipment in preparation for the mission. They were a diverse group, veterans, scientists, and soldiers, all ready for whatever lay ahead. But Aria could feel the tension in the air, thick with the uncertainty of what they might find. Markov approached her, his helmet tucked under his arm. "You heard the message, Captain. Are we really going through with this?" Aria looked him in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "Humanity's future depends on it." He nodded, though there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "Understood." The team was ready, and within minutes, they were boarding the shuttle that would take them down to the surface. As the shuttle's engines roared to life and the ship pulled away from the Phoenix, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. The ruins, the energy readings, Zoratha's warning, it all felt too deliberate, too coordinated. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of the barren, desolate planet, the ancient city stretching out below them in eerie silence. Massive, crumbling structures rose from the ground like the bones of a forgotten world. The alien technology, dormant for millennia, pulsed faintly beneath the surface, calling out to them. Landing in 5, Drayton's voice came over the comms. Prepare for impact. Aria's grip tightened on the armrest. She had no idea what awaited them on the surface, but there was one thing she knew for sure. The Vrethians would stop at nothing to keep humanity from finding the answers hidden here. And if they didn't get to them first, Zorath would make sure they paid the price. The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, the doors hissing open to reveal a cold, empty world. The team quickly disembarked, weapons raised, scanning the surroundings. But there was no sign of life, no movement, no sound. Aria looked up at the towering ruins in the distance. A deep, unsettling silence hung over the place, as if it had been abandoned for far longer than any of them could comprehend. She turned to her team, her voice firm. Stay sharp. We don't know what's waiting for us here. As they moved deeper into the ruins, a sense of unease settled over Aria. The walls seemed to whisper, the alien architecture curving in ways that defied logic. Each step felt heavier, as if the very air around them was pushing back. Then, as they reached the central chamber, they saw it, an enormous, pulsating core embedded in the ground. The alien energy surged from it, more potent than anything they had ever encountered. And in that moment, Aria realized that the fate of humanity rested not just on the technology within these walls, but on the decision she would make right here, right now. What they uncovered could either save or destroy them all. Prepare to extract, Aria ordered, her voice sharp. We've found what we came for. But in the distance, hidden in the shadows, something moved. And it wasn't human. The silence of the ancient ruins pressed in on Captain Aria Jensen as she surveyed the core, a strange glowing relic from a long-forgotten civilization. Its energy hummed softly beneath the surface, making the air around them feel charged with an eerie power. Aria's team had gathered in a semicircle around it, weapons still drawn, eyes darting from corner to corner. There was a palpable sense of danger, but also of anticipation. This was the breakthrough humanity needed, but it came with risks that Aria couldn't yet fully understand. Captain, the readings are spiking, Markov called out, his voice tight with concern. He hovered over a scanner, watching the holographic data dance erratically on the display. Whatever's down here, it's reacting to our presence. Aria narrowed her eyes. The core had been dormant for centuries, possibly millennia. But now, as her crew stood before it, it seemed to awaken, its pulse quickening in rhythm with their every movement. A deep sense of foreboding settled in her chest. She turned to Drayton, who was observing their surroundings with suspicion. Is this what we came for? Aria asked, her voice steady but carrying the weight of a dozen unspoken questions. Is this really worth it? Drayton glanced at the glowing core, his face lit by its light, and then back at her. The technology here could change everything for humanity. But we need to be careful. We don't know how it works, or what might happen if we trigger it. Aria sighed, her thoughts churning. She knew the stakes. Earth's resources were almost depleted, and their colonies on distant planets were fragile at best. Humanity needed something to give them an edge against the Vrethian Alliance, something that would force their enemies to rethink their plans. The ancient ruins were their best chance. Yet, each step felt like walking on the edge of a blade. Proceed with caution, she ordered. Markov, get a deeper scan. We need to know everything before we do anything rash. As Markov worked, Drayton approached Aria, his tone quieter, more personal. Are you sure about this, Captain? We've been pushing the crew hard. Some of them are starting to doubt you, questioning whether all this is worth the risk. Aria's gaze met his, a flicker of doubt crossing her face before she masked it. I don't have the luxury of doubt, Drayton. We can't afford to second-guess ourselves. If we pull back now, it'll be a victory for the Vrethians. They'll see our hesitation as weakness. Drayton hesitated, his eyes softening. And if it goes wrong? Aria didn't answer immediately. She knew that even if they succeeded, it would come at a cost. Every victory, every technological leap, came with consequences. But she couldn't afford to let that stop her. Not now. We take responsibility for our actions, she said, her voice firm. Drayton nodded, but the concern never fully left his eyes. The weight of command was a burden Aria had carried for years, but in moments like this, it felt heavier than ever. A crackling sound from Markov's console broke their conversation. "Captain, I've got something," he said urgently. "The core's not just a power source, it's an entire system. A network of interconnected technologies. It's like a map, showing us everything. And the signal's not just ours. There's something else, someone else, interfering with the system." Aria's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, someone else?" "It's not clear yet," Markov responded, adjusting his equipment. "But the signal is originating from outside this chamber. It's faint, almost like it's trying to hide. Someone's been here before." The implications were staggering. If the Vrethians knew about this place, it was no surprise they were so eager to stop humanity from accessing it. But Aria couldn't let herself be distracted. They had to secure the core before it fell into enemy hands. "Prepare to extract," she ordered sharply. "We're not staying here any longer than necessary." As her team began to prepare for their retreat, the air in the chamber suddenly shifted, heavy with an unnatural tension. Aria's pulse quickened, and she instinctively reached for her sidearm, her gaze scanning the shadows that seemed to grow deeper by the second. "Did anyone hear that?" Lieutenant Hayes, a quiet officer who usually kept to himself, asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard it too," Drayton responded, his hand on the trigger of his weapon. "Everyone stay alert." And then, it happened. From the darkness at the far end of the chamber, figures began to emerge, cloaked in shadow and blending with the dim light of the ancient ruins. Aria's heart raced as she counted the silhouettes. 4. No, 5. "Ambush!" Drayton shouted, but it was already too late. The figures sprang forward with unnerving speed. They were humanoid, but their features were distorted, alien in a way Aria had never seen. They were not Vrethian soldiers, but something else, something older, more primitive, and just as dangerous. The first to charge at Aria was a tall figure with armor that seemed to shimmer and shift with the light. It reached for her, and in the blink of an eye she fired, taking it down with a clean shot to the chest. But it didn't fall. Instead, it hissed, its body twitching unnaturally as if it were made of something far more resilient than flesh and bone. "Fall back," Aria ordered, her voice sharp as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Her crew moved quickly, covering each other as they retreated toward the shuttle. But more of the creatures continued to pour out of the darkness, their movements erratic and fluid, as though they were part of the ruins themselves. "We're not going to make it," Markov shouted, barely dodging an incoming strike from one of the creatures. He fired back, but his shot was absorbed by the creature's strange, shifting armor. "Keep moving," Aria barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. They had disturbed something they shouldn't have, and now they were paying the price. But humanity's survival was always a fight, a battle fought not just in the stars, but within their own souls. They reached the shuttle's hatch, but Aria hesitated for a moment, eyes scanning the darkness one last time. She could still feel the presence of the strange creatures closing in, and her instincts screamed that they were not alone. Someone, something, had been watching them. "We're leaving," Aria said, her voice unyielding. She ordered the shuttle to take off, and with a sudden jolt, the ship shot into the sky, leaving the alien ruins behind. As the shuttle ascended, Aria's thoughts raced. Zorath had warned them. But there was no turning back now. They had the technology, and soon, humanity would understand its power. The real cost of peace had just begun. But Aria knew one thing for certain: the war was far from over. It had only just begun. The Phoenix hovered just outside the perimeter of Earth's atmosphere, its engines purring like a beast on the prowl. Captain Aria Jensen stood in the command center, staring out at the endless expanse of space. It felt like everything she knew was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and no matter how hard she tried to grasp it, she couldn't find solid ground. The remnants of the ancient ruins, now safely aboard the ship, weighed heavily on her mind. She knew humanity's survival depended on what they had retrieved, but there was something about the power they'd uncovered that unsettled her. "Captain, you should see this," Markov's voice broke through her thoughts. His tone was sharp, carrying a sense of urgency that immediately caught her attention. Aria turned toward him. He stood at the scanning station, eyes glued to the readouts on the screen. "What is it?" "It's the signal," Markov said, adjusting the console settings. "It's getting stronger. And it's definitely not just us. There's something else, something close." Aria's pulse quickened. "Zorath." "I'm not sure," Markov replied, his face tight with concentration. "But whoever it is, they know what we've found." Aria's instincts screamed at her, and for a moment, she wondered if she'd made a mistake by taking the technology from the ruins. But she pushed the thought away. She'd committed to this, and backing down wasn't an option. If the Vrethians had access to this knowledge, it could mean the end of humanity as they knew it. "Prepare the fleet," Aria ordered, her voice hard and steady. "We're not waiting for them to come to us. If someone's after the technology, we're going to meet them head-on." Drayton, her first officer, stepped up beside her, his expression serious. "You're pushing hard for this, Captain. I get it, but the crew's on edge. This isn't just about the Vrethians anymore. If we go to war with whoever's out there, it won't just be a battle, it'll be a slaughter." Aria met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "Humanity hasn't survived this long by sitting on the sidelines. We fight or we die. There's no middle ground." Drayton nodded, though the worry in his eyes didn't fully dissipate. "Understood, Captain." The decision was made. The Phoenix would lead the charge into the unknown, with or without backup. As Aria ordered the crew to prepare for battle, a sudden, low rumble shook the ship, followed by a crackling voice over the comms. "Captain Jensen." The voice was unmistakable. "Zorath, you've made a terrible mistake. Surrender the technology, and we may yet spare your miserable species. Continue on your current path, and we will be forced to destroy you." Aria's jaw clenched. "We'll see about that, Zorath. This is humanity's fight, and we're not going to lose it." The transmission cut off, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Aria felt the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. She had never been one to back down, but this was different. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This was a fight for humanity's future. Minutes later, the Phoenix broke through the atmosphere and into the deep void of space, its engines pushing them toward the unknown. Aria stood at the helm, staring out at the stars, her mind racing. She knew the risks. But in her heart, she believed humanity could do the impossible. "Captain, we've got incoming," Markov called out, his voice tense. "Multiple ships, Vrethian signatures." "They're here," Aria said softly, as though speaking the words aloud would make them more real. "Prepare for combat." A series of sharp beeps rang out across the command center as the Vrethian fleet materialized on the sensors. They were massive, a dark wall of ships that dwarfed the Phoenix. But Aria had no intention of backing down. "Not now. Not ever. Arm all weapons," she ordered. "We engage on my mark." Her crew moved swiftly, each officer falling into their roles without hesitation. They had trained for this moment, but Aria knew this would be unlike any battle they had ever faced. The Vrethians were relentless, and they would not stop until humanity was crushed. "Ready," Drayton said, his voice cool but tight with anticipation. "Mark." Aria barked, and the Phoenix surged forward, its weapons locking onto the Vrethian ships. Energy blasts rippled from the ship's cannons, tearing into the closest enemy vessel. But the Vrethians were swift, their ships weaving through the oncoming fire with deadly precision. The battle had begun. Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the chaos unfold. The Phoenix was holding its own, but the Vrethians were far superior in numbers and firepower. Their ships were designed for this, designed for war. Humanity had only just begun to flex its muscles, and the odds were stacked against them. "Captain, we can't keep this up forever," Markov shouted. "Their reinforcements are on the way." Aria's mind raced. She could feel the tension rising, the weight of her decisions pressing harder with each passing second. But there was no room for doubt. "Not now. Drayton," she said, turning to her first officer. "I need you to get us close to their command ship. We're going to take the fight to them." He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the boldness of her command. "Are you sure? If we get too close—" "I'm sure," Aria cut him off, her voice resolute. "We're not playing their game. We're making our own rules now." With a sharp nod, Drayton took control of the helm, steering the Phoenix toward the heart of the Vrethian fleet. The battle raged around them, but Aria's focus never wavered. Every moment, every decision, counted. They had no choice but to push forward. "Fire everything we've got," Aria commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Phoenix unleashed a barrage of weapons, piercing the hulls of the Vrethian ships. The explosions lit up the space around them like fireworks, but the enemy didn't back down. They were relentless, like a swarm of locusts, determined to destroy anything in their path. But Aria refused to retreat. "Get us to the command ship," she ordered. "We need to hit them where it hurts." The Phoenix plowed through the battlefield, dodging incoming fire as Aria's crew continued their assault. The Vrethians, sensing the threat, focused their fire on the Phoenix, but it was too late. They had already made it to the heart of the fleet. "Ready the boarding pods," Aria said, her voice cold and calculating. "We're taking this fight to them, one way or another." As the Phoenix lined up alongside the Vrethian command ship, Aria steeled herself for what was about to come. This was no longer just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the future of humanity. And Aria Jensen wasn't about to lose. The Vrethian command ship loomed large on the forward screens, its massive dark hull cutting through the void like a predator circling its prey. The Phoenix had successfully breached the outer perimeter of the enemy fleet, but the hardest part was just beginning. Captain Aria Jensen stood at the helm, her grip firm on the console as she watched the heart of the Vrethian force grow closer. "All systems are online, Captain," Drayton said from the navigation station, his voice calm but tense. "The boarding pods are ready. We'll be able to deploy in seconds." Aria's pulse quickened as she absorbed the scene. The bridge of the Phoenix was filled with the hum of energy and the quiet urgency of crew members executing their commands. They were in enemy territory now, and there was no turning back. "Prepare the boarding teams. Once we board, there's no room for mistakes," Aria replied, her voice as steady as she could muster. "This is it. The final push." A tense silence enveloped the bridge as the crew got into position. Aria turned, her gaze meeting Drayton's. "Any intel on the ship's layout?" "Weak points." Drayton's eyes flicked to his terminal. "Nothing concrete. The Vrethians are notorious for keeping their ships well guarded. But I've been able to hack into their comms. We know where their command center is." A calculated glint crossed Aria's eyes. "We'll head straight for it. We need to cut the head off the snake." Her decision was met with an approving nod from Drayton. "Understood. We're ready when you are." The ship's warning lights flashed in the command center, signaling the arrival of enemy fire. Aria clenched her fist. They were getting closer. "Hold steady," Aria ordered, as the Phoenix rocked with the impact of a barrage of Vrethian laser fire. "Fire back. Take out their turrets." The Phoenix's weapon system roared to life, a series of blasts lighting up the dark expanse of space. The Vrethian ships surrounding them faltered for a moment, but the command ship remained firm, its shields reflecting the blows without giving an inch. The battle outside was an ongoing storm of lasers and explosions, but Aria's focus was now fixed on the ship they were about to board. As they neared the massive Vrethian vessel, her comms officer, Lieutenant Hayes, spoke up. "Captain, we've got incoming Vrethian fighters. They're trying to stop us from boarding." "Not today," Aria muttered under her breath. "Drayton, get us in position. Now." Drayton spun the controls, and the Phoenix moved with surprising agility for a ship of its size, evading the incoming missiles and dodging fire from the fighters. Aria's hands tightened on the console, watching the enemy ships fall behind them. "Boarding pods, launch," she commanded. The doors to the boarding pods slid open, and Aria's team, fully armored and armed, lined up. Each member, clad in black tactical suits, was ready for the fight that awaited them. Aria's hand was steady as she keyed in the launch sequence, sending the pods hurtling toward the Vrethian command ship with terrifying speed. Within moments, the pods were in motion, cutting through the Vrethian ship's defenses, their engines igniting as they slammed into the hull with a powerful thud. "We're in," Drayton reported. "Move out." Aria's voice rang clear over the comms as the pod doors opened with a hiss. Her team flooded into the enemy ship's narrow corridors, weapons raised, eyes scanning for threats. The metallic walls of the Vrethian ship loomed around them. The air was thick with tension, the harsh red lighting casting a menacing glow across everything. There was no sound except the soft, rhythmic hum of the ship's engines. The group moved swiftly through the corridors, Aria leading the way. Her pulse was steady, but her mind was sharp. Every second counted. The command center was their objective, and they couldn't afford to waste time. "We've got movement," Lieutenant Hayes whispered as he motioned toward the end of the hall. Aria nodded and signaled the team to spread out. A small squad of Vrethian soldiers appeared at the intersection, their eyes glowing with an eerie, inhuman intensity. Without hesitation, Aria raised her weapon and fired. The first shot took down one of the soldiers, but the others responded in kind, returning fire. The corridor erupted into chaos, the air filling with the sound of gunfire. Aria ducked behind cover, her heart pounding. She peeked around the corner, picking off the Vrethians one by one. Her team was relentless, each member moving with precision, taking down the enemy without a second thought. They had trained for this moment, and now it was happening. Everything they'd worked for had come down to this fight. When the last Vrethian soldier collapsed, Aria gave a sharp nod. "Push forward." They continued their advance, the command center not far off. The ship's interior grew more ornate, the hallways wider and more decorated, a sign that they were nearing the heart of the Vrethian ship. Every step they took felt like a countdown to a final confrontation. They reached the entrance to the command center, a massive, reinforced door blocking their path. Aria's eyes flicked to Drayton, who was already preparing a breaching charge. "On my mark," Aria said, voice calm yet urgent. Drayton nodded and planted the charge. A soft beep signaled it was ready. "Mark!" The explosion rocked the door off its hinges, sending debris flying. Aria wasted no time, charging through the opening with her team right behind her. The room was vast, filled with high-tech consoles and alien control panels. At the far end, a Vrethian officer stood, glaring at them. Zoratha's lieutenant, the one who had been giving orders throughout the fight. "I knew you would come," the officer said coldly, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're too stubborn to see reason." Aria didn't hesitate. She aimed her weapon directly at him and fired, hitting him squarely in the chest. He crumpled to the ground without a sound. "We've got what we came for," Aria said, turning to face her crew. "Let's finish this." As she moved to the central console, she quickly accessed the ship's command systems. The Vrethian technology was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, but Aria wasn't new to dealing with complex systems. Within seconds, she had unlocked access to the ship's network. "We have control," Aria confirmed, her eyes flashing with determination. "The Vrethians won't be able to stop us now." But just as she began to feel the first taste of victory, a chilling voice echoed through the room. "You've won this battle, Captain Jensen. But you will never win the war." It was Zorath, his voice cold and filled with rage. "You may have taken the heart of my fleet, but your species is weak. You will break under the pressure of true power." Aria's fingers hovered over the console. "We'll see about that, Zorath," she muttered. Her eyes steeled as she keyed in the final command that would disable the Vrethian fleet's coordination systems, ensuring they were powerless to respond. She turned to her team. "We've crippled their command. The Vrethians won't be a threat anymore." Drayton stepped up, his face grim but resolute. "Let's get back to the Phoenix. This fight isn't over, but it's a step in the right direction." As they retreated, the Phoenix looming just outside the Vrethian ship's wreckage, Aria allowed herself a moment to breathe. The battle had been brutal, but humanity had shown its strength. The war was far from over, but now they had a fighting chance. Darkness to light. The Phoenix hovered above the wreckage of the Vrethian command ship, its engines purring softly in the vast emptiness of space. Aria stood at the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the destruction below. The battle had been fierce, the cost high, but humanity had prevailed. "For now." "Captain, we've finished the damage assessments," Lieutenant Markov said, his voice breaking through the quiet hum of the bridge. He looked up from his console, a mixture of exhaustion and relief in his eyes. "The Vrethian fleet is in disarray. Their command structure is in ruins. It's a significant blow, but they're not completely out of the fight. Not yet. Aria nodded, her gaze fixed on the wreckage. She had known this moment would come, victory, but not without consequences. The Vrethians were a force to be reckoned with, and though this was a decisive blow, the war was far from over. The victory had given humanity a fleeting moment to breathe, but what came next was just as important. Good work, Markov. Keep monitoring their fleet. We need to stay one step ahead, she said, her voice firm and decisive. Drayton, her first officer, stepped up beside her, his eyes scanning the tactical displays. What's our next move, Captain? Aria exhaled slowly. The weight of leadership bore down on her, but she had no time to dwell on it. There were bigger issues at stake, humanity's place in the galaxy. We need to regroup. The colonies need to know we've secured the system, but we can't afford to give them a false sense of security. The Vrethians will strike again, and we need to be prepared. Understood, Drayton said, his voice steady, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. And the technology? The alien artifacts we found in the ruins. Aria's hand brushed against the console as she thought. The technology they'd uncovered in the ancient ruins was humanity's greatest asset, but it was also the most dangerous. She had seen the power it could wield, and she knew that if it fell into the wrong hands, it could be the end of everything. We take it to the heart of our defense systems, Drayton. We integrate it with our military capabilities, but we keep it under lock and key. We can't let anyone, human or alien, have unfettered access to it. Agreed. But you know the crew's getting restless. They've seen what this power can do, and some are starting to ask if it's worth the risk. Aria looked at him, her expression hardening. The risk is worth it if we can survive. Humanity has always pushed the limits, and we've paid the price. But we've also survived. We have to use this technology to secure our future. A sudden blaring sound interrupted their conversation. It was a call to the bridge. Aria's eyes narrowed as she turned to Lieutenant Hayes, who stood by the comms console. Captain, we're receiving a direct transmission. It's from Earth. Aria's heart skipped. It could only mean one thing. The war had reached their home. Put it through, she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The screen flickered, and a familiar face appeared. Admiral Tashiri, the leader of Earth's defense forces. Her face was grim, her eyes shadowed with worry. Captain Jensen, Tashiri's voice crackled through the comms. We've received reports from the colonies. There's been a surge in Vrethian activity on the outer rim. They're regrouping, and they're more organized than before. We need reinforcements, and we need them now. Aria's grip tightened on the armrest. The Vrethians were far from finished. She had known it, but hearing it from Earth's military leader made it all the more real. We're on our way, Admiral, Aria said, her voice unwavering. But we can't go in unprepared. We've secured a victory here, but it's only a small part of the war. Tashiri's face tightened. I understand, Captain. But we're running out of time. The Vrethians are not going to wait. If they strike Earth... We won't let them, Aria interrupted. I'll get the Phoenix to Earth, but we're taking every precaution. No more surprises. The transmission ended, and Aria was left standing at the helm, the weight of the galaxy pressing on her shoulders. The Vrethians were regrouping, but now humanity had something they hadn't had before, knowledge. The ancient alien technology they had uncovered wasn't just a weapon. It was a tool. And with it, humanity could level the playing field. She turned to Drayton. We leave for Earth immediately. But we need to stay ahead of the Vrethians. We can't let them surprise us again. Drayton nodded. I'll prepare the fleet. But I need to ask, what about the technology? It's powerful, but how do we know it won't destroy us? Aria's eyes flicked to the alien artifacts stored in the ship's hold. We don't know. But we're not the first to use it. We just need to make sure we're the last. The Phoenix set course for Earth, the planet growing larger on the view screen as they neared their destination. Aria stood by the window, her thoughts racing. What if the Vrethians had already breached Earth's defenses? What if the technology they'd found wasn't enough? Captain, we're entering Earth's orbit, Markov's voice broke through her thoughts. We're prepared to deploy our forces. Understood, Aria said, her voice steady. "We'll be ready. No one gets through Earth's defenses, not while we're here." As the ship descended toward Earth's atmosphere, Aria allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The war had changed her. She was no longer just a captain. She was a symbol of humanity's fight for survival. Her every decision carried weight. Every choice had consequences. But she knew one thing for certain: humanity had the strength to rise above. And now, it was their turn to shine. As the Phoenix entered the atmosphere, Aria's thoughts turned to the future. Earth was in danger, but they were not without hope. The ruins had shown them the way forward, and with the power of the ancient technology, humanity would not only survive, they would thrive. "We're not done yet," Aria whispered to herself, watching Earth grow closer. "This is just the beginning." The battle for humanity's future had only just begun.